guys. So I hope you enjoyed that little video clip of one of the things that we're going to be working on later this chapter. That was through the use of the Powtoon website, which we'll get into whenever we start looking ahead into your projects. Okay, so I wanted to go ahead and go through this brief note PowerPoint slide with you. I will post the actual PowerPoint slide too, but I wanted to at least introduce this, and then a lot of this stuff will be actually more of a hands-on learning through either like civilian lab data collection, which I'll explain more here in a minute, or actually doing our research and looking through and developing something for our projects. Okay, so the Anthropocene epoch, which is where we're looking at human impact on our planet. Alright, so introduction you saw in the Powtoon video right before this. The Anthropocene is going to translate directly into the age of humans. It is an age that, basically it's a time span where we're looking from the 1760s, which is right about the Industrial Revolution, to the present day. That's our main focus, although they do look at the beginning of the human species as well. Okay, so the Anthropocene epoch falls within or after the Holocene age. The Holocene age was a geological time span that began approximately 10,000 years ago at the end of the last glaciations. Okay. Now, scientists are currently trying to determine if the Anthropocene epoch should be its own age or still to be considered part of the Holocene. Now, because we are actually in this time span right now, they're still trying to determine and to collect data whether or not we should just be included in the Holocene or actually be our own separate category. Okay, a lot of the scientists as of now are leaning towards own separate category, okay, but no definite answer on that yet. Okay. So when we're looking at things like the Holocene, like you see here, in the Anthropocene, we're looking at this time scale, this geological time scale. And this is what geologists do. They map out the time scale and they label them based on what characteristics of what weather patterns were there, what type of rocks were there, what type of living creatures were there at the time. And so they've got them all broken down. Now this is very hard to read just because it's a lot of information. If you look up into, there's my mouse. Okay, so this was a long time ago. Okay, and it works its way up to more modern times. Okay, so the Holocene is actually right up here. Okay, you can hardly even read it on this picture. And so the Anthropocene would be this little teeny tiny segment, just showing you how little the human species has actually been around and focused on. Okay. This one's a little easier to read, although it's not technically the geological timescale. This one does show it in a easier to read map, okay, compared to the last slide. So it's looking at our planet being formed. Okay, then whenever you see that there's a break in the graph, it means that there was millions of years that had gone by before life on Earth appeared. And it goes through the different geological time periods, okay, that hopefully you talked about last year in physical science. And so you can see, okay, the Anthropocene really doesn't start until right here, this little red line. Okay, so just to give you an idea, the amount of time that humans have been around on this planet is so insignificant compared to the rest of the time periods that we've had living creatures around. Okay, not saying that humans are insignificant, but the time we've spent, even though to us it might feel like humans have been around forever and ever and ever, in the grand scheme of things we find that is not true. Alright, so a little bit of introduction here. The Anthropocene a lot of times will focus on the Great Acceleration. Now, if we were in class, I would ask you some questions like, what do you think the Great Acceleration would mean? How have we gotten better or thrived as a species? Okay, what have humans done that is fairly advanced, or have we gotten better at? And we'd probably get up into some of these answers. So we've seen humans have grown in areas such as population, technological development, and communications. Those two kind of go hand in hand. Consumerism, urbanization. Urbanization is the growth of cities, the growth and development of cities. And then energy consumption. Okay, so we've grown a lot since the 1950s, particularly in these areas. Now, unfortunately, these growths will oftentimes come with negative consequences. Okay, so a lot of times when we see growth in population and consumerism, we see a lot of these go hand in hand. So there's a higher consumption of natural resources. A lot of times there'll be a higher production of waste and pollution with more people around. With more people and the pollution that they bring, a lot of times this can cause changes in climates. We have to have areas to build our cities and to grow the food for our humans. So a lot of times deforestations and habitat loss and high rates of extinctions because of this. What you're going to notice in this chapter, much like the rest of this year that we've talked about, there's going to be these connections all the time. So really, you can't just pick one little thing and be like, we're going to focus on this, because all of this stuff is going to connect together. Okay. All right, so if we take a look at one of the main aspects of this Anthropocene effect, obviously human beings. So the scientific name for humans is Homo sapiens, okay, which is a Latin word. When we get into scientific names, they're always pretty much written in Latin. Sometimes a little bit of ancient Greek slips in there. But we always see that there is two parts. The first part is the genus name, and the second part is the species name. Okay, so if we are thinking about it, the genus name is kind of like the bigger group, and then the species name is the more specific one. Now in class I would say, okay, the prefix homo. You would say, oh, like homozygous, okay? When I would ask you what the prefix homo means, a lot of times you would say, oh, it means the same. And it does when it's a prefix. However, when it's separated out by itself, so notice it's not attached to the word sapiens, it's off by itself. When it's by itself, it means man. And then sapiens is going to directly translate into wise. Okay, so apparently they think we're fairly intelligent in the grand scheme of things. Okay, so Homo sapiens, translating loosely to wise men. Now, humans showed up about 2 million years ago, 2,580,000 to be more exact, and that's when we first see the first species of humans. However, it is not the Homo sapiens that we are today, it was the Homo habilis. Okay, so it was one of the first ones that we saw at this time. Okay. Now, as time progressed, if we fast forward all the way to 1804, we notice that the human species has evolved. Okay, they've adapted to their surroundings, they're growing in population, they're thriving at this point, at least for the most part. And so in 1804, we see the worldwide population for Homo sapiens hit about 1 billion. And then just to show you a little bit of growth here, the current population in 2020 is 7.7 billion. Okay, so in the last 200 years, we've grown by more than 6 billion people. Okay. Now, with the amount of people, okay, comes obviously some of those other consequences. So some of those consequences would be, okay, with people, there's more homes, there's more buildings, there's more needs for factories, and so we see carbon emission starts to come into play. And we know that carbon is found all over the world, okay, in a variety of forms when we go into nature. And so we have carbon in our bodies, we have carbon in the ground, we have carbon in the atmosphere, and all of that is very normal. However, we are getting to a point where there is so much carbon in the form of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere that we're starting to run into much bigger issues. Okay, so this was first started whenever we started burning things. A lot of times it was burning fossil fuels for fuel or for heat. And so what we see is that as we have continued to burn fossil fuels in our factories and in our machines and things like that, the carbon concentrations in the atmosphere have increased dramatically. So before the Industrial Revolution, okay, right around, we had a carbon concentration of 280 parts per million. Okay. Now, in 2009, they had skyrocketed up to 387 parts per million. Okay, and that's the amount of carbon dioxide that we have in our atmosphere. And currently they are at 412 parts per million. So you can see that has not gone down at all. In fact, it has increased pretty significantly. And these readings are all taken from Mauna Loa Observatory, which is in Hawaii, which is one of the main observatories that they track carbon concentrations in the atmosphere. And you can see from this graph that it's exponential. Okay, it just keeps going up, 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 up. One of the reasons why we see that this carbon emissions never ever really comes down is because the carbon doesn't really go away very easily, and we'll get into that more here in a second. The reason why we are concerned about how much carbon we're putting into the air is because our atmosphere is very susceptible to change. Okay, so as we get more and more carbon, our atmosphere actually becomes almost more weak because of the carbon concentration. So as carbon increases, it decreases the amount of oxygen, which we know is super important for us because we need it for our bodies to function properly. It causes our planet to become warmer. Okay? It can also cause problems with our marine life because it can cause oceans to drop in pH, making them more acidic, okay, which is very detrimental. We've talked about pH previously with pH and other living organisms and how small changes in pH can cause big changes or drastic changes in living organisms. This can lead to more animals, especially in these ocean habitats, to become more endangered or extinct. Now, one of the reasons why carbon is so hard to get out of the air is because we really only have one process that can take it out, and that is photosynthesis. If you remember your photosynthesis equation seen below, we have CO2 plus water makes glucose and oxygen. Add a little bit of sunlight in there and you're great. Okay. The problem is, okay, we actually need to be able to have the plants to do that. And unfortunately, you guessed it, humans are cutting down the trees that are currently the only solution to our increasing carbon problem. Okay. Alright, now at this time, I'm only able to record 15-minute segments, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here. Okay, I didn't want to leave you on a cliffhanger. Alright, but we're going to stop here for a second, and then we will continue this lesson tomorrow. Okay, and then the day after that, we will get into some of the laboratory work. I hope you guys are doing okay. Have a good day.